This video is brought to you by Law Excellence IAS Academy.
Dear students, welcome to DEEP, Daily Editorial Enrichment Program of Law Excellence R&D. Let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 5th July 2019. The first article for discussion, Hurdles, Ideas and Silver Linings. This article talks about the present economic situation. So here, how to balance the growth and fiscal responsibility. So there is a dilemma. If we want to bring in growth, the capital has to be brought in. And also we have to bring in demand from the consumer. So if either of these things to happen, the fiscal deficit will get widened. If the fiscal deficit gets widened, the ratings of India will come down and it will lead to loss of foreign investments. So this is the dilemma which we have. In this case, if the growth has to be achieved, what is required? Capital is required. From where this capital comes from? Borrowings, foreign investments, or domestic savings, etc. You know the savings rate is coming down. And the second is borrowings will crowd out the private capital. What does that mean? Capital is required both for government and also for private sector. Where the capital will be more productive, it is in the private sector. When the capital becomes more productive, better is the growth. So, if government borrows and uses the capital which is existing in the economy, then automatically crowding out of the capital to the private sector happens. So, that is not an option. And the next is foreign investments. When the foreign investors will come into India when India has good ratings. So if fiscal discipline goes vary, obviously the foreign investments will not come to India. So in this case, what India has to do? The first is it has to give the asset sales. So what do we mean by asset sales? Let's take the land is there with the public sector undertakings, huge amounts of land. This can be sold. And the second, the shares in the public sector companies also can be disinvested. The second, RBI has a positive balance sheet. And Bimal Jalan committee spoke about this and is appointed on this. There is a huge controversy which has come on this. So there's a little chance that the surplus which RBI holding on its balance sheet will be shifted to the government. And then 5G spectrum. Even if you observe this, the telecom companies are bleeding now. If you talk about Airtel or Jio, because of intense competition, there is a heavy bleeding in the telecom sector. So the way forward, one is increase borrowings. How, from where it has to be increased? Obviously, it has to be increased from the private sector, no, that is people. Any increase in borrowings can endanger the capital to the private sector, which already we have discussed. Then we have to give stimulus. What is the stimulus over here? Either it can be given through tax cuts or governments increasing spending on infrastructure. So either of these two things, either decreasing the revenue of the government through tax cuts or increasing the spending of the government on infrastructure, both of them will lead to undesirable consequences. So there is a big dilemma before the finance minister how to balance the needs of the growth and the fiscal responsibility. Addressing this is a major challenge in this budget. And in this case, there is one advantage the government is getting. Recently, SEBI has given new regulations for mutual funds. According to this, every mutual fund has to invest at least 20% of their fund value in the government bonds. It means that the government bond market can be helpful to the fiscal responsibilities. Can the government help create jobs? How can the government create the jobs? So recently, labor force survey, it has stated that unemployment rate is highest in the country in the last 45 years. So this PLFS is more dependable and accurate for the reasons that it is the data which is collected spread over 4 quarters. It means almost an year. So the changes in the employment on periodic basis can be understood through this particular survey. So second important point is unemployment rates are very high among the educated and well qualified. Why? Because they will be looking for the desirable job. If they do not get desirable job, they do not like to settle for the menial jobs. So this is also an underemployment scenario. Many of the PhD people applying for the constable jobs is a simple example of underemployment situation in India. So then, how can we improve the public employment? How can we improve employment in total in the country? If you see MSME sector, it can contribute huge to employment. So manufacturing sector's growth in China, which is capital intensive at the same time labor intensive. So many a times it is felt that if an industry is capital intensive, obviously jobs will be lost. So Chinese example clearly says that capital intensive sectors can also be made labor intensive. That is the right path for India. And the second, public employment. If you see, in India, for every 100 people, only 2 public employees are there. If you go to Scandinavian country, it is close to 8. Even desired thing is 3.5. So to bring in optimal public service delivery, the number of public employees shall increase. So public sector still has the space to take up new employees. And the third thing, today, skills are the major problem. It can be improved by exposing the people fresh from the college to various sectors. Apprenticeship is very much important. So, apprenticeship, accreditation of this apprenticeship, and providing for value for the certificate which has come, and mobility in the apprenticeship. So, all these will improve the skills. And the next is there will be Inspector Raj. In India, especially MSME suffers from Inspector Raj because of the rigid labor markets. So, many of the companies remain unregistered and they do not like to be registered. The reason is they have to be victims of license Raj and labor Raj once they get into it. So, that's why encouraging the entrepreneurship among these young individuals can only be possible with effective ease of doing business, with improving ease of doing business. That's how we can state it as. And then, remember this, protect the worker, not the job. It means excessive rigidity in the labor markets is going to harm development of the industry in this country. So as of now, with our labor laws, we are protecting the job, not the worker. So provide the security nets to the worker. Do not provide for the job or permanency in the job. So that is what this article is. And the next is talking sanctions endangering peace. So this is about Iran nuclear issue. So let's understand briefly about this issue. So before going into this, watch this movie called Argo. In this, you will clearly know what was the Islamic revolution in Iran. So in this case, Iran initially in 1953, it was the CIA which overthrew the democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh. And after that, a puppet was kept in the office. His name is Shah Muhammad Raja Pahlavi. So he is the person who established the nuclear program. Whom do you think gave the know-how of the nuclear program to them? It is none other than USA. So with the assistance of USA, a civil nuclear program started. And in 1974, this brutal regime of the Shah is overthrown, which is famously called as Islamic Revolution. So this Islamic Revolution, which made the rulers in Iran replaced by Ayatollahs. So these Ayatollahs have a strong religious position that weapons of mass destruction shall not be produced in this country. So, as per the claims of this article, from 2003 there are no strong efforts towards the weapons of mass destruction. But when Ahmadinejad was the president, so country has produced or enriched the uranium to the weapon level grade. They wanted to bring in deterrence. But however, it has come to an end in 2003. And 2015, there were IAEA inspections. They also have clearly stated that Iran is only producing the uranium for nuclear energy. So, later when Obama was the president, a joint comprehensive plan of action was signed, which is famously called as Iran nuclear deal. Here the exchange is Iran has to stop all its nuclear enrichment and the United States of America, European countries will lift sanctions against it. So Iran agreed. European Union is also party. US is also a party. Now US moved out of this agreement. in spite of Iran showing all the compliance to the agreement. Mr. Trump believes that this is too lenient an agreement towards the Iran. And Trump regime is supportive of Israel and Saudi Arabia's position on JCPOA. So they believe that Iran will grow as a regional power challenging them. So once the sanctions were withdrawn, then it is natural that Iran shall start producing its own nuclear enrichment. But obviously, that can be shown further as a reason to attack the Iran. In this case, if anyone has to be faulted out, it is the unilateral move of Mr. Trump rather than the Iran. In this case, what is the impact of India? Impact on India. So, oil imports, India has stopped. These are coming at concessional rates for India. Second, oil prices are expected to increase, which is going to destabilize entire economy. The Chabahar port, which is an alternative route to Afghanistan, which India is building in Iran, it is also in doldrums. Then ONGC Videsh Limited, it has invested in Farzad B oil fields, and these investments are struck. So, how to protect ourselves from unilateral actions like this? So the way out is the financial system have to be made independent of United States of America. China did this to an extent. It has established a bank of Kunlun, through that it is able to transact with Iran. And the next is European Union also brought in an instantaneous trade exchange called as Instex. But all the goods cannot be traded on this Instex. But these are all alternatives for the financial sanctions imposed by the United States of America. Next is raising the bar. So this is about Congress party. So Nehru Gandhi family is an asset and a liability to the Congress party. This family holds the flock together. At the same time, the new generation of the population criticizes the Congress for its dynasty politics. These dynasty politics are caught in the hands of coterie made up of old guard. These are popularly described as power brokers who are involved with politics of manipulation. And the satraps are power brokers or coterie, whatever we may call it as, unless if it is been dismantled, Congress and liberal view for this country will not be available. So Congress has to live for an effective opposition at least. It means that the death of the Congress or Congress Mukt Bharat is not good in the interests of India. So competitive politics, alternative political systems and political views are essential. In this context, Mr. Rahul Gandhi resigning from the president of position of the Congress it is serving two politics. So dynasty politics, that symbol will slowly move away. And second, by taking the responsibility for losing elections, he himself is becoming a moral or else brought in a moral argument in the Congress that accountability has to be there for performance. This is what article says. Blue Sky Visions. This is about making India a 5 trillion economy by 2025. How can we make that? By achieving a growth of at least 9%, which we did not touch till date. So, how can we achieve that? With more investments. How the more investment comes? The animal spirits has to raise. How the animal spirits has to raise? By providing for a virtuous cycle, by providing for a hope. How the hope has to be provided? There has to be savings, investments, demand and exports. These have to reinforce with each other. Then this brings in the investments further. And investments will provide for further production. Further production leads to further growth, more jobs, more consumption, greater demand. This virtuous cycle has to come in Indian economy. And the second is, this article talks about an important thing, that is making data as a public good. So what is this data as a public good? Government has enormous data, and if this data is being kept in the public domain, so many startups can come up which can improve the public service delivery. So more economic strength and economic nurturing can be created through this data. And the next is nourishing of micro, small, medium enterprises which can provide for greater employment. And then for production, human resources, labor is essential. So the labor laws are too rigid in India. These have to be relaxed. So what are the problems or challenges? The tax revenues are not keeping as per our expectations. So it is expected that every month 1 lakh crores shall be the GST collection, but we are not getting as expected. And the next is welfareistic programs like PM Kisan, Ayushman Bharat are being promised in a big way by the government. And the next, because of the crisis in the Middle East, oil prices are expected to grow. And Indian economy, especially agricultural economy, creates a huge demand in the markets, rural economy. So this rural economy is a monsoon dependent economy. As of now, monsoons are not very encouraging. The next, let's see certain news articles. A Detroit of EVs in India. This talks about India making India as a hub for production of electric vehicles. For that, factories of lithium ion are being established in India. Call to ease legal logjam for better contract enforcement. Now, one of the major reason is pending cases before the courts. If the legal system is effective, rule of law is effective, contract enforcement is effective, India's position on ease of doing business index will go up. So any of the investor or any businessman, what he wants, stability and reliability in transactions. The stability and reliability in transactions, it comes only if we can ensure something called quick solving of the issues which are existing between the people. So the better transactions and quick resolution of the differences that will attract the investments. In this case, there are two words: case clearance rate. What is meant by this? The number of cases coming in into the court, the number of cases cleared by the courts. This is what is called case clearance rate. So it has to be reached 100%, and there has to be special courts, etc., have to be created to clear all areas which are presenting in the courts. The next is economic survey sets out blueprint for $5 trillion economy. So the economic survey clearly says that the private investments has to bring in the expected 9% growth in India. So this can only happen through the virtuous cycle of savings, investments, and exports. The next is the fiscal deficit is the concern. So the chief economic advisor suggests that India has to reduce its fiscal deficits by disinvesting the PSUs, selling the land of the PSUs, and also boosting the non-tax revenues. What are these non-tax revenues? It can come from asset sale, or it come from fines, or it can come from disinvestments in the PSUs. These non-tax revenues have to be increased, and private funds needed for Swachh Bharat. The first phase of the Swachh Bharat, it has focused on building cleanliness within, that is building the toilets. The second phase is to focus on solid and liquid management in the country, and this management needs a mindset change. So that's why building new sewers and separation of the rainwater from the others, all these things needs investments. From where these investments has to come? So that is through crowdfunding, or through private investments, or public private partnerships. These are the various models that are being expected. And the next is graying India must delay retirement. So aged population is increasing in India. It is expected to reach 16% by 2041. So in this context, the pension burden on the government is going to increase. So how it can decrease pension burden? By increasing the age of retirement for the people working for the government. So age of retirement is expected to increase. And also India's young population is also growing up. So as young population is increasing, so by 2021-31, we are expected to create new 9.7 million jobs. And added to that, by 2031-41, another 4.2 million jobs have to be created. This is going to be a big challenge. If demographic dividend is not reaped in India, it will convert into nightmare. And the next, economic survey lavishes praise on Samagra Vedika. In the previous article, I told to you that is data has to be made as a public good. So in this context, the government of Telangana has collected the data through household survey, and it made this data available on the public platform. It also integrated the data of different departments into one single whole. If you see, when the backend data is well integrated, it leads to the best outcome, or it can provide for a huge economic potential for research, planning, etc. So we can take this as an example, that is Samagra Vedika of Telangana government for well data organization and making the data availability, that is data transparency. So these are the articles for today. Thank you very much. Have a great day.